And we are back in I'm going to call this the second part of a two series. Alli and Peter talking about what's up in education and where they are. So, Alli, how are you?
I mean, they had to wait a week for this, and I got to wait all of 20 seconds.
Exactly.
So
Yes. Yeah. So, we are doing this
I'm
back
still
to
in
back.
Italy.
Obviously, we have the same clothes on. We're still wearing black and we're still wearing the prison outfit. I like that's a prison outfit. I don't think it looks prisony, but it looks very Italian to me, but I don't
Actually,
know.
I mean, it's not. I mean, people are now definitely gonna have to check out the YouTube version of this. It's just a striped shirt, but because of what you were talking about, I was like, oh, well, I'm wearing white and black. You're wearing black, and this could look like a prison.
Yeah, here we are.
Here we are.
I do remember going to Alcatraz and we brought back the Alcatraz shirts for our kids. And the funny thing is, the next year my parents went, because my brother lives out in Northern California, and they came back for the exact same outfits for our kids. Miscommunication there on the family side. So, but to kind of start coming up, I can tell Allie's thinking because she knows the questions I'm going to ask her. But we were talking a little bit about summing up the educators that we had on Joe, Natalie, and Maureen. So if you haven't seen or heard those episodes, go back. They're three wonderful educators who are just doing some amazing things. And so we kind of, pulled that apart a little bit, unpacked and repacked that, going back to skydiving. And then Allie dropped a bomb question on me. So it was like, if you could go back and you've done this, which is great. Like, so I think the premise of this whole thing, Allie, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one of us, I'm in the system fighting it, doing micro corrections, if you want to call them that, and playing around in there, getting angry, frustrated, winning, whatever it is, hitting every emotion. And you have been in education for 10 years as an educator at the secondary level and are now on a 1 year, possibly more, leave of absence. What do you call it? Is it sabbatical or?
Sabbatical. Yeah, that's what it's called. Like it's called a sabbatical. Feels so like grown up to be on sabbatical. I am a grown up, but I mean, like that word, people are like, a lot of people don't know what it is, but it's a leave of absence.
Mhm.
But you can go back to your role at the end of the year. You can also decide you don't want to go back.
Mhm.
In universities, though, it's usually like a semester or a year, and then you are coming back. It's
Right.
not like so. Yeah, to be determined.
It depends on like contracts. So just kind of digging into that. There have been like I've been at schools where there's the leave of absence that is basically you do come back or a sabbatical, and one of the I think most common around here is you in Illinois anyway. You have a sabbatical. You have to study something, or you got to give a kind of a summary. And if if you do a sabbatical, you are contractually required to come back for a year or two at least, depending on what the district is. Is that anything that you have like at your school or?
I don't. I think. I mean, you could call it a leave of absence then.
Hmm.
But at the time of this recording, I am using this year to do other educational projects and immerse myself. Like this is one of them, right? Like exploring different ways to do education to kind of really figure out what do I really think about the last decade of my life? That's like taking a gap year and trying to sum up, experiences in the educational field, step outside of it. And if I do go back, I'm going to have a totally different perspective or whatever role I go into next. If it's a formal role, if I don't keep doing my own thing, the lens that I'm getting from this year is going to just kind of renew and catapult me into the next season or chapter, or actually what I'm calling it's a whole new book.
Hmm.
I'm not in a new chapter. I'm in a new book of my life right now. So yeah, it's I don't know the technical term, but
Hmm.
I'm calling it the sabbatical.
Yeah. Um, and I do like obviously you wanna link up with Allie and follow her across. You do a lot on Instagram. I think that's your one of your main places, and I've actually learned a lot just following, watching a teacher who has left the classroom. And there are times where you're like, yes, this is amazing. You might even hear like a bell or something at a fast food restaurant and you cringe. I get it. But we're earlier in the year. I mean, this is the second or third month, depending on where your school is, and as you're kind of out, because you have the summertime, unless you're a year-round school. But yeah, so this is like 10 years in education. I mean, I'm going to ask you the two tough questions, but the first one is, so yeah, 10 years ago. I'm actually 20. I'm almost 21 years in. Sometimes I ask myself this question, but if you 10 years ago, if you know right now what education was in that 10-year sprint that you did, and it always goes by so fast. What would you tell Alli going into being a teacher and educator at the secondary level?
Yeah. Man, it is such a good question. That
I know.
go back in time
Back at
question.
you.
Right, I know. But you didn't get any time to think about this. So I'm getting the slightly thought out answer. Um, for me, one of the biggest things that I would tell myself, but I don't know if my 10 years ago self would really take it in, because there's something that happens with the wisdom of time and going through those experiences. But one of the things I definitely would have told myself is to enjoy it. Get off of the hamster wheel that everyone wants you to be on, and do more and be greater. And it's interesting, actually. I'm just thinking of this now as I am talking through this answer a little bit. But there's an educator that was in my master's program. Her name is Michelle Dempsey. I don't even know if she's actually on social media and stuff. Well, if she is, we'll tag her and whatnot. But it was during my master's program, and she said we had to read lots and lots of books, but she was like, look, you can only do so much, and focus on changing one thing in your classroom, one major thing in your classroom every year. And over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, you will have made substantial amount of change. So don't be caught in doing it all. Because that's what I felt really early on, is I had to do everything. And there is so much creating that you have to do whenever you teach a new class or you go to a new school. And certainly in your first couple of years, I mean, it's exhausting, just the creation process. And I would have told myself to just slow down. I probably tried to do 20 things in the first year, almost burnt myself out. But I loved teaching the subject so much, and the kids, I mean, I still talk about I'm sure you remember your first year kids, there's something special about them that you can't replace. I had the absolute best first year teaching experience in terms of the students that I had. And if it wasn't for them, it's kind of I don't know if I would have kept with it, because they were just phenomenal. But it did feel like a giant hamster wheel. So if you're newer in education or thinking about it, I would highly recommend, and I have to find the book that I just can't remember it right now, but it is focusing on one thing. And also I would tell myself that it really does take about 5 years to find your teacher voice, 3 to 5 years. You can think that you know who you're going to be as an educator, but you just don't know. Right. You evolved. You evolved in this podcast. You've evolved in, your how you look at education over the course of your career. And I was oh no, this is exactly who I'm gonna be. No. I'm such a different teacher now and educator now than I was in my first 5 years.
Yeah. That's hard, and I think the first 5 years that's essential. I mean, you had a few saving graces there that kind of helped you get through that. I mean, we have a lot of educators that burn, 3 to 5 years, right? So that's
Common.
yeah, right. And I think that's something interesting. It says something about The thing that scares me, what you said in there, is like the culture of the way the job is. And, we look outside at all the different cultures of newer, like I'm going to generalize the Google of everything else, right? And you come to a point where you either have to accept the fact that, yeah, we're never going to be the Google, and I'm going to be okay with that. And I'm being kind of a downer here, but hey, what the hell? Or you make your move and you're like, yeah, you know what? I want to go work for a Google of whatever. So that's tough. And thank you for sharing that. That's very difficult. It's a decision, and sometimes, unfortunately, in education, it becomes a life decision because there's pensions involved. There's all these different things that are involved depending on where you are in the States. There are kids you have, like when I left schools, right? Like, and you left schools, you left kids behind or whatever. They have to work with other people, and there's that sense of duty to somebody else versus yourself. So that kind of runs into my next question is, so you're a couple months in. It's still rather early, I would say, for an entire year, but I think you live an entire year every month, because watching the things that you're doing in the last months, it's like incredible. I mean, you are like, if anybody wants to be coached on how to swing for the fence, talk to Alli. I mean, honestly, like you're in Italy right now, right? And you're making things happen. You're traveling around. You're still continuing your education. You're still continuing to teach others. What are the variables? I'm gonna shoot the question. Like, what are the variables? What are the variables that are going to keep you out of the classroom and continue on a different path, or what are the variables, what are the variables that will get you back into a classroom and continue to, continue your teaching and education journey there?
So the variables that would keep me in is, of course, like, I love chemistry, right? So I love science. I love helping people get excited about science. My brain just like sees science everywhere. So, getting to do that with a generation or with people will always, I think, be some part of like whatever I do. Just because it's such a core part of me. Like, I don't even know how to remove it. But in terms of going back into a traditional school model, even now being out. And I would say also because of like just this podcast series and just all the conversations we have and I have with other people just talking about disrupting education and what it means to be an educator. Like, this year is showing me like how much more I need to push back on the system that I was a part of and really complicit with for so long. And so it's interesting, like, if I'm thinking about going back, I'm thinking about what opportunities are there for me to go gradeless or to shift the narrative around testing or to do curriculums where we're meeting the learners where they're at. How can I, as an educator, support students in a way that also supports me, right? Like, there needs to be a better balance. So, right, like, it's interesting, like that last question, like, what would I tell myself? Like, don't burn myself out. But I would also be like, how can I be a better teacher advocate, right? Like, this job is insane. If you actually like break it down, like what we have to do on a daily basis and who we're responsible for. And these are like children. I mean, at the end of the day, they are protected individuals and they have a lot of needs. And right. And so you push all of that aside, your own needs, your own life aside in order to serve those that are in front of you each and every day. And it is an on job. Like, not being on in the classroom now we're coming up on like 5 months, like, summer, yeah, that's normal, but like, right, it's still a break from being on every single day. It's hard to imagine a life where I am on all the time again. And so a variable, we've talked about this in times where it's like, how do I keep myself from being that like person at the front to being like in the messy middle? So like looking for school cultures that are really interested in doing education differently is a variable that I'm really interested in now. way more than I've ever been before. Like I always thought like, oh yeah, like I'll try this different stuff. I love inquiry learning, I love project-based learning. I love, these like micro, things that I can control. But now it's like I feel like I'm growing into this like macro phase of
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in the normal. So hey, if you're not doing school normally and you need a science educator, someone, that wants to, get down and dirty with education and just like really robustly change it, that's what I'm looking for. So,
Is there a school out there
yeah.
right now you want to give a shout out to that you would actually
I
just
don't actually, like the thing is like I'm not in that phase,
right,
right? So it's like I'm not in that phase of like actively looking, right? Like I'm just exploring opportunities, right? So
right.
like one of the things that I am getting to do is I'm teaching this really radical science literacy class in January. I've never seen anything like it before. I'm super stoked to do it, partnering with Bard College, and um, that project enticed me for every single reason I just listed.
Mm-hmm.
They're 18-year-olds. It's a freshman level class. And they're doing radically different. I've never seen science taught like this. And they're willing to push the envelope, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like a great, thing. And so it's like I'm not interested in the status quo anymore. Give me something different.
There are so many people who say that and then they don't do it, whether they're in the classroom or outside. And, I can appreciate the fact that, when you select people that you're going to work with and network with, etc., you do find the people like, I mean, for me, I think one of the things that I struggle with is the people who are not don't accept that status quo, but then they don't do anything, right? And I can't hang with those people. I don't know. It's very difficult for me. Where do you stand on that line? Like, because in a school there are a lot of people, students, parents, educators, whatever, that are okay with the status quo or will say, yeah, this sucks, but whatever, and then they just kind of lie over and die, and I don't know. That's very hard for me to swallow. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, so I know I'm blessed to take a year off and just kind of pick and choose my projects. That's not always a reality for some people for whatever their reasons and
Mm-hmm.
life circumstances are. And so I've been at just like you in plenty of places in my career where you're like, "Ah, we could just change all of this," but then it's almost like the system is so full
Yeah.
and they keep people so busy into this hamster wheel. And so it's like, yeah, you might like pause and talk to your buddy and be like, hey, yeah, like this, we really want to do all this radical shift. And you're like, oh, but I have to do this laundry list
Right.
worth of stuff. And it just gets pushed to the side. And it's almost like you I will go back to Maureen's episode, and like if you don't follow Maureen and everything, she basically just decided to create what she wanted. She
Mm-hmm.
stepped out, and I don't like, and I believe she has a book about it, and
Mm-hmm.
she talks about it, and she has podcasting about it. If you want to learn about microschooling and like how to basically take education into your own hands, like I don't know someone better
Yeah.
than her. And so it's like, but you have to literally lock arms with people like that. An episode a long time ago now, months ago, was Joel Vargas,
Mm-hmm.
and he's doing this amazing work at JFF, and it's like it is doing stuff differently, and they're literally partnering with schools. Like you have to lock arm. You talk about Iowa Big, and I know there's a school out in like California, so it's just like at some point you have to remove yourself from the system.
Mm-hmm.
This is my unfiltered thing, like,
Yeah.
right, like you have to at some point you will realize like I can't be complicit in a system that I like is so different than how I feel about it now, like the micro doing stuff at the micro level, like in your own classroom, isn't big enough.
All right.
And so who knows, you might be getting there, Peter.
I think I'm getting closer. I don't know. I wanted to kind of round this out, and thank you so much for sharing your lens. I think a lot of people, again, are looking at, including myself, I mean, watching what you're doing and how you're doing it, and how does it fit into what I want to do or what other teachers want to do. We all have like different responsibilities and different paths and different things like that. But if you were to have an educator, whether they're 5 years or 25 years or anywhere in between, that is like, I'm thinking about doing something else, what would you tell them?
I wouldn't say, like, go back to school and get more certifications. Funny enough, I was on the teachers lounge the other week, and that was like something that was said. And I was like, whoa, why are we asking teachers to do more? Like, do less, do less. I am not about putting more on teachers' plates, because having been a teacher, I know how full that plate is.
Mhm.
Like literally plates on plates on plates all up your arm. Um, but if you're thinking about doing something different, if you can, okay, if it's feasible for you to make a plan, like I should preface this with, like, I did not just like willy nilly leave my job. Like, I planned it out a year in advance,
Yeah.
made like worked on planned on doing this well in advance. Okay. So it's like you need a long runway, longer runway than you think. I would say at least 6 months
Hmm.
to a year, plan out, and then find stuff you're passionate about that is outside of education, or it's like not in the like whatever role you're in now, right? So like teaching the science literacy class at a university is not something that I've ever done, but it's something that I'm doing this year, and I actually got it a long time ago, right? Well before I was kind of like when I was making the decision to do it.
Hmm.
So I would say, don't just like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna quit and like I'm gonna just go start a new school. Like, link arms with people who are doing the work, reach out to them. You're usually like the most amazing people. We're gonna have more of them on,
Yeah.
I'm certain, over as time goes on. And give yourself a long runway to find projects outside of what you're doing, but are still within, like it like start smaller than you even think. And if you have an idea of something that you want to do, reach out to Peter and I, and we'll tell you if it's
Yeah.
too big.
Yeah. Right.
As people who have been like working on this now and you for a long time with the
Hmm.
podcast and everything, we can kind of like, and there's lots of people that can guide you, be like, that's a great place to start, or that's way too much, because you don't want to burn yourself out on like this new project and get nowhere, and then you just feel like you're stuck back in the hamster
Yeah.
wheel. So that's what I would say.
That's excellent advice. I've seen it both ways, and it's good to say because I never knew how long like you planned before you took this year. I also have unfortunately seen a lot of teachers who are just so like done. They jump. There's like the carrots that are dangled by ed tech companies and all these things, and it doesn't turn out right. I mean, it is way wrong. They haven't planned. They haven't had to develop the relationships. They haven't, done these things. So you feel for those teachers because they're so desperate sometimes, and sometimes it's, I mean, they're, stereotypically it's a younger, I should say, an earlier in their career teacher because they're like, I can't, no, and they haven't really honed in on, the skills they've already created, even in 1 year, even in one semester of teaching the skills that you can build. And they're just like, oh, this looks great over here. And by the way, they're paying maybe 60% more than I'm getting paid, and I'm going to jump. And, sometimes ed tech companies don't do their homework and they don't really know who you are. They just like, you're a teacher. And unfortunately, there are some wolves out there too. So you do have to take your time and plan. That's wonderful advice, just to take a moment. It's very hard for me because I'm not patient, but to take a moment and to really start to put things together and go forward with that. So excellent advice. How wrapping it up? We do have some cool guests coming up. We won't shout out any names yet, but keep in tune. But any last thoughts before we jump into some very interesting guests that we continue the series?
I love the series. It's maybe shifting. I won't say too much because to be determined.
Yeah.
We got to keep it a little under wraps, get you ready for the next one.
Yeah.
But we've just heard so many great voices of what if we go back, we should even do this. Go back and look at like episode 1. Where did we start this conversation? To like, wow, where are we now with it? It would be so different. So, right in August, and it'll be November now when this comes out. It's such a different time, thing. But yeah, give yourself time. don't be afraid to, go
Yeah.
big or go home, I guess. That's
Right.
what I do. I mean, I jump out of planes and it's fine. That's what I'd end with.
I just jump out of planes.
Yep. Yep. That's right. You go back to another episode
right.
if you want to know more about that.
And honestly, everybody, just connect with us. We are community builders. We're also part of a lot of different communities. Some of the communities that Alli's a part of, I'm not part of. I'm part of some that Alli's not of. So we're just crossing paths here, and it's pretty amazing. And well, here's to continuing, and we hope to hear from all you listeners. And thank you so much for hanging out with us again. We got some more stuff coming up every Wednesday morning, 5 o'clock Central AM. These things drop 6 Central in the East Coast. So we'll talk to you soon.